Hello guys. Welcome to Pika Fiction. So in this video, we will see what if Ash was betrayed and started a new harem led by the villainous Lusamine. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The shattered crown. The roar was a physical thing. A tidal wave of sound that washed over the dais and vibrated in Ash Ketchum's bones. It was the collective voice of 100,000 people packed into the Winden Stadium, their energy a brilliant, blinding sun confetti, shimmering like rainbow-colored snow, drifted down from the sky, catching in his hair and on the shoulders of his jacket. The weight of the champion's crown trophy in his hands was solid, real, the culmination of a journey that had spanned years and crossed continents. He looked out at the sea of faces, a blur of adoration, and found the ones that mattered. His mother, Delia, was in the front row, tears streaming down her face, her hands pressed to her mouth in a gesture of overwhelming pride. Beside her, Professor Oak was beaming, his expression a mixture of academic satisfaction and paternal warmth. On the dais with him, his oldest friends formed a guard of honor. Brock stood to his right, arms crossed over his chest, a rare, unguarded smile on his face, the rock-solid presence he'd always been. To his left, Misty's fiery hair was a beacon. She wasn't teasing or jabbing at him. Her eyes, a deep cerulean, were wide with a respect he had spent a lifetime earning. Pikachu, his partner, his other half, was perched on his shoulder, cheeks sparking with joyful, uncontrolled bursts of electricity, his small body trembling with the same exultation that coursed through Ash. Further in the crowd, he saw them all, May and Max, waving frantically. Dawn, giving him a confident thumbs up, her Piplup mimicking the gesture from her arms. Iris and Salon, a study in contrasts, her wild energy, his refined applause. Clement and Bonnie, cheering so loudly their faces were red. And Serena, she stood near the front, her gaze locked with his, her smile so radiant it could have lit the entire stadium. It was a look that promised futures. A look that spoke of a shared journey that was far from over. Even his rivals were there, their presence a testament to the respect he commanded. Paul, his face an unreadable mask, gave a single, sharp nod. Trip was taking photos, a grudging historian to Ash's triumph. And Gary Oak stood beside his grandfather, his arms crossed in a mirror of Brock's pose. He was clapping, but his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. There was something tight in his posture, a tension in his shoulders that felt jarringly out of place in the celebratory storm. Ash caught his eye, and for a fleeting moment, the applause seemed to fade, replaced by a strange, unnerving silence that existed only between the two of them. Gary's smile faltered, replaced by an expression Ash couldn't decipher, not envy, not quite pride, it looked almost like pity. Then the moment was gone, swallowed by the roar of the world. "You did it, Ash," Brock's voice was low, rumbling beside him. "You actually, finally did it. World Coronation Monarch. The #1 trainer in the world." "We did it," Ash corrected, his grip tightening on the trophy as he hoisted it higher. The crowd's roar intensified, a physical manifestation of his victory. Pikachu let out a triumphant, "Pikachu!" that echoed through the stadium's sound system, a squeaky counterpoint to the human thunder. This was it. The summit. The dream he'd been chasing since he was a 10-year-old boy in Pallet Town. He had his family, his friends, his Pokémon. He had their love and their respect. He was home. He had no idea it was all about to burn. The after-party was a more intimate affair, held in the massive, glass-walled Champions Lounge overlooking the now darkened stadium. The press had been dismissed, the dignitaries had offered their final, fawning congratulations, and now it was just them. His family. Laughter echoed off the polished floors, mingling with the clinking of glasses and the happy chatter of Pokémon let out of their Pokéballs for a well-deserved rest. Charizard was holding court in a corner, letting a star-struck Bonnie measure his wingspan. Sceptile was locked in a silent, intense staring contest with Paul's Torterra, a friendly rivalry that never seemed to sleep. Bulbasaur was calmly mediating a minor squabble between an overexcited Totodile and a grumpy Corphish over a plate of Pokémon food. It was chaotic, it was loud, it was perfect. Ash felt a hand on his arm and turned to see Serena. Her blue eyes were sparkling. "I never doubted you for a second," she said, her voice soft amidst the noise. Thanks, Serena. It means a lot that you're all here, he replied, a genuine warmth spreading through his chest. He looked around the room, a king surveying his court, and the feeling from the stadium returned. That unsettling flicker he'd seen in Gary's eyes. He scanned the room and found him again, standing in a tight circle with Brock, Misty, Clement, and May. They were talking in low, urgent tones, their expressions grim. Every so often, one of them would glance his way, a flicker of anxiety in their eyes before they quickly looked away. Something was wrong. Ash, Serena's voice pulled him back. Is everything okay? He forced a smile. Yeah, just, taking it all in. But the knot in his stomach was tightening. He excused himself, promising to be right back, and started toward the group. As he approached, their conversation died instantly. The silence was abrupt and heavy. Hey guys, what's up? Ash asked, trying to keep his tone light. You look like someone just told you the Pokemon Center is out of potions. Brock wouldn't meet his eyes. He stared at the floor, his jaw clenched. Misty looked pale, her usual fiery demeanor completely extinguished. It was Gary who stepped forward, his face a mask of somber resolve. Ash, we need to talk, he said. His voice was steady, but it carried a weight that made the hairs on Ash's arms stand up. Somewhere more private. A cold dread began to seep into Ash's veins, chilling the warmth of his victory. He nodded, his own smile feeling brittle and fake. Okay, the observation deck? The observation deck was a wide, open-air balcony that offered a panoramic view of Wyndon's glittering skyline. The wind was cool, a stark contrast to the stuffy warmth of the party. The door hissed shut behind them, sealing them in a bubble of sudden, tense quiet. It was just him, Gary, Brock, Misty, Serena, who had followed with a worried look, and Clement. Pikachu stayed glued to his shoulder, his tiny body now rigid with apprehension, sensing his trainer's distress. All right, Gary. What's so serious it couldn't wait? Ash asked, turning to face them. Gary took a deep breath. He looked less like a rival and more like a doctor about to deliver a terminal diagnosis. Ash, what we're about to say, it's not because we hate you. You have to believe that. It's because we're your friends, and we're scared. Scared of what? Ash asked, his voice sharp with confusion. Of you, Misty blurted out. The words hung in the air, sharp and cold as ice. She flinched as if she hadn't meant to say it so bluntly. Ash stared at her, then at the others. He saw it in their eyes, a deep, unnerving fear. Me? What are you talking about? I just won the World Championship, we should be celebrating. That's just it, Ash. Clement pushed his glasses up his nose, his hand trembling slightly. Your victory, it's part of a pattern. An anomaly. We've been working with Gary, with his research team. Gary pulled a datapad from his jacket. He tapped the screen, and a complex series of graphs and energy readings bloomed to life. For the past year, my lab has been monitoring global aura fluctuations and dimensional stability. We've seen spikes. Unprecedented energy signatures that correspond with major events. The crisis in Kalos with the giant rock. The Ultra Beast incursions in Alola. The battle with Eternatus here in Galar. Yeah, I was there, Ash said, his patience fraying. We were all there. We stopped them. No, Ash, Gary said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. You were at the center of them. Every single time. You don't just find trouble, it doesn't just find you. You are a lightning rod for it. Your unique aura, your bond with Pokemon, especially legendaries, it's not normal. It's destabilizing the fabric of reality. Ash felt a humorless laugh bubble up in his throat. Destabilizing reality? Gary, have you been sniffing too many gloom? This is insane? Is it? Brock finally spoke, his voice heavy with sorrow. He finally looked up, and Ash was shocked to see the raw pain in his eyes. Think about it, Ash. How many times have you made direct contact with a legendary Pokemon? Dialga, Palkia, Giratina, Arceus itself. Ho-Oh, Lugia, the Regis, Solgaleo, Lunala. The list is longer than any other human in recorded history. It's not a coincidence. You're drawing them out. Your very existence is a beacon, and it's pulling the pillars of the world out of alignment. We have evidence, Clement insisted, pointing at the datapad. Energy readings taken from you after the battle with Eternatus were off the charts. You resonate with the same frequency as an ultra wormhole. You are, for lack of a better term, a walking natural disaster. The words hit him like physical blows. These weren't strangers. This was Brock, who had been like a big brother. Misty, his first traveling companion. Serena, who had looked at him with such adoration just minutes before. Now they looked at him like he was a ticking time bomb. So what are you saying? Ash's voice was dangerously low. Pikachu's cheeks began to spark, a low, angry crackle. We're saying it has to stop, Misty said, her voice shaking but firm. For the good of the world. For your own good. And how do you plan on doing that? Ash challenged, a cold fury replacing the dread. It was Serena who delivered the final, devastating blow. She stepped forward, her eyes swimming with tears. We need you to surrender your Pokémon, Ash, she whispered, her voice breaking. All of them. Especially Pikachu. Your bond with them, it's the catalyst. It amplifies the effect. They need to be kept in a safe, contained environment where they can't contribute to the instability. The world tilted on its axis. The glittering lights of Winden blurred into a meaningless smear. He looked from her tear-streaked face to Brock's stony grief, to Misty's fearful determination, to Gary's cold, clinical resolve. They meant it. They had talked about this. They had planned this. This was a coup. An intervention based on fear and junk science. No, Ash said. The word was flat, absolute. Ash, please, be reasonable, Gary pleaded. A private paramilitary organization specializing in de-escalating these kinds of threats has already been briefed. They call themselves the Aegis Task Force. Their commander helped us understand the gravity of the situation. They're prepared to handle this humanely. Aegis Task Force? Ash scoffed. You brought a private army into this? You went behind my back, listened to some stranger, and decided to strip me of my family? He took a protective step back. His hand went to Pikachu's head, a silent promise. You are not taking my Pokémon. We don't want to fight you, Ash, Brock said, his hands raised in a placating gesture. He took a step forward. But we will if we have to. Then you'll have to, Ash snarled. The betrayal was a physical pain, a white-hot knife twisting in his gut. As if on cue, Brock's hand went to his belt. Steelix blocked the door. The lounge door was too small, but the balcony was open. A red beam of light shot out, and the massive form of the Iron Snake Pokémon materialized with a deafening roar, its colossal body sealing the only way back inside. On the other side of the balcony, a splash of red light resolved into the intimidating shape of Misty's Gyarados, its serpentine body coiled in the air, its fanged maw open in a silent roar. They were boxing him in. Don't do this, Ash warned, his voice a low growl. His own Pokémon, his friends, were still inside, unaware. It was just him and Pikachu against the world. Pikachu's voice was a low, guttural warning, the fur on his back standing on end, his cheeks sparking violently now. It's for your own good, Serena cried out, her voice filled with desperate conviction. That broke him. The hypocrisy. The sheer, maddening arrogance of it. My own good? He yelled, his voice cracking with rage and hurt. You call this for my good? You're cowards. You're terrified of something you don't understand, so you decided to put it in a cage. He didn't even think. He just acted. Pikachu, use quick attack, let's go. Pika. With a burst of speed, Pikachu shot off his shoulder, a yellow blur aimed not at his friends, but at the railing of the balcony. Ash was right behind him. They weren't going to win a fight, not trapped like this. They had to escape. Stop him, Gary shouted. The world erupted into chaos. Clement's Bunnelby shot mud into the air, trying to slow him down. Gyarados lunged, its massive head trying to corner him. Ash dodged and weaved, his movements fluid and sure, years of on-the-fly battles ingrained into his muscle memory. He was almost at the railing, ready to leap, to trust Pikachu to find a way down. But then Steelix moved. It didn't attack him directly. Its massive tail swung around, not to crush, but to block, to pen him in. Ash skidded to a halt, trapped between the steel wall and the open maw of Gyarados. Pikachu, thunderbolt on Gyarados, full power, Ash commanded, desperation coloring his voice. Pikachu, seeing his trainer and friend cornered, let out a furious cry. He hated fighting his friend's Pokémon, but Ash was in danger. He leapt into the air, his small body becoming a conduit for an immense amount of electrical power. The air crackled, the smell of ozone sharp and pungent. Pika, shoo! A colossal bolt of lightning, far more powerful than any standard thunderbolt, erupted from Pikachu's body. It was a spear of pure, white-hot energy, born of fear and fury. It wasn't aimed at Ash. It was aimed at the looming threat of Gyarados. But in the chaos, as Ash dodged a preemptive lash of Gyarados' tail, he stumbled. He tripped over a loose piece of confetti-strewn decking, his balance thrown. For a split second, time seemed to slow. He saw the bolt leave Pikachu. He saw Misty's look of horror. He saw the brilliant, blinding light arc through the air. And then he saw it veer, its trajectory altered by his own clumsy fall, moving directly into its path. He had no time to scream. The world became white light and unbearable pain. The thunderbolt, a weapon of love and protection, slammed into his chest. It wasn't a gentle shock, it was the raw, untamed power of a deeply bonded and terrified Pokémon. His muscles seized. His vision vanished. The roar of the stadium, the shouts of his friends, the glitter of the city. It all dissolved into a singular, deafening hum. He felt a sensation of burning, of being torn apart and put back together in the same instant. His last conscious thought was of Pikachu's horrified cry, a sound of pure, unadulterated despair. Then, there was only darkness. He collapsed onto the deck, a thin curl of smoke rising from his jacket. The battle was over. The silence that followed was more profound and damning than any roar. His friends stared, frozen in shock at the scene they had created. From the lounge, the sound of Charizard's confused roar echoed as the party finally noticed the commotion. The world's newest champion lay unconscious on the ground, seemingly struck down by his own most trusted partner. The narrative was no longer in his control. It was theirs, and it was a lie. Rain. That was the first thing he registered. A cold, miserable drizzle that seeped through his thin jacket and pasted his hair to his forehead. The second thing was a dull, throbbing ache that started in his chest and radiated through his entire body. He groaned, pushing himself up on one elbow. He wasn't on the balcony. He was in a grimy, narrow alley, the stench of overflowing dumpsters and damp refuse thick in the air. The brick walls on either side were slick with grime, covered in graffiti that bled and ran in the rain. Above, a sliver of bruised purple sky was visible between the decaying rooftops. How did he get here? Memory returned in a sickening flood. The party. The confrontation. The fear in their eyes. We need you to surrender your Pokémon, Ash. The Thunderbolt. He looked down at himself. His champion's jacket was gone, replaced by a simple, worn hoodie. His pockets were empty. No Pokédex, no Pokéballs. He frantically felt his belt. Empty. They had taken them. Charizard, Sceptile, Bulbasaur, all of them. They had taken his family. A desperate, guttural sob escaped his throat. He clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms. Betrayed. Not by an enemy, not by Team Rocket, but by them. By Brock, Misty, Serena. A small, mournful whimper came from beside him. He looked down. Curled into a tight, miserable ball against his side was Pikachu. His fur was matted and soaked, his ears drooped, and his body was trembling, not from the cold, but from guilt. When he saw Ash looking at him, he flinched, his dark eyes wide with a pain that mirrored Ash's own. Pika, he whispered. It was the sound of an apology. Ash's anger dissolved, replaced by a wave of protective instinct. He reached out and gathered the small Pokémon into his arms, holding him tight against his chest. It wasn't your fault, buddy, he murmured, his voice hoarse. It was never your fault. They pushed you. They pushed us. Pikachu nuzzled into his chest, a low, sorrowful sound rumbling in his throat. They were all that was left. Two fugitives in a world that had turned against them, stripped of everything they had ever known. He was no longer a champion. He was a ghost, haunted by the faces of his friends. He didn't know how he had escaped, or who had helped him, but it didn't matter. He was alone. He leaned his head back against the cold, wet brick, the rain washing over his face, mingling with the silent tears he could no longer hold back. He had no plan, no destination. He just had a broken heart and an ache in his soul so profound he thought it might swallow him whole. It was in that moment of absolute despair that a new sound cut through the steady patter of the rain. It was a low, powerful hum, a sound of advanced technology that felt utterly alien in this derelict alley. He looked up, his eyes widening. Descending from the low-hanging clouds was an aircraft unlike any he had ever seen. It wasn't a helicopter or a jet. It was sleek, impossibly black, its surface seeming to drink the dim light. It moved with an unnatural silence, its engines barely a whisper. It hovered at the mouth of the alley, its landing ramp lowering with a soft, pneumatic hiss, spilling a clean, white light onto the filthy pavement. A figure emerged, silhouetted against the light. It was a woman, tall and impossibly elegant. She wore a tailored black coat that fell to her ankles, her long, blonde hair immaculately styled despite the drizzle. As she stepped into the alley, her features became clear. It was Lusamine. But this was not the Lusamine he remembered from Alola. The frantic, unhinged energy was gone. The wild, obsessive gleam in her eyes had been replaced by a chilling, razor-sharp focus. She moved with the poise and confidence of a predator, her heels clicking softly on the wet ground. Her gaze was fixed on him, and there was no pity in it. There was something far more dangerous: appreciation. Ash instinctively tightened his hold on Pikachu, pushing himself into a more defensive posture. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice rough. Lusamine stopped a few feet away, a faint, knowing smile playing on her lips. "The world thinks you're a menace, Ash Ketchum," she said, her voice smooth as velvet, yet carrying an edge of tempered steel. "They're broadcasting it on every channel. A dangerous trainer, so unstable his own Pokémon turned on him. A threat that has been neutralized for the public good." "They lied," Ash spat, venom in his tone. "Of course, they did," Lusamine replied, taking another step closer. She didn't seem to notice the rain or the filth around them. "They didn't betray you because they hate you. They betrayed you because they fear you. They look at you and see an anomaly that breaks their fragile rules. They see a power they cannot quantify or control, and their small, frightened minds can only react in one way: to chain it, to cage it, to tame it." Her words struck a chord deep within him, echoing the very thoughts swirling in his own mind. She understood. She knelt, bringing herself to his eye level. Her eyes, a striking shade of green, bored into his. "I know what it's like to be consumed by a pursuit of beauty and power. My obsession nearly destroyed me. But when I was freed from Nihilego's poison, I began to see things differently. I saw that true power, true beauty, isn't something to be captured and preserved behind glass. It's something to be unleashed." She glanced at Pikachu, then back at Ash. "They see a freak of nature. I see potential in its purest, most untamed form. I see the living embodiment of the bond between human and Pokémon, elevated to a level no one else has ever achieved." She stood up, extending a hand to him. It was a formal, elegant gesture, an invitation. "You have a choice, Ash Ketchum. You can stay here in this alley, a broken hero drowning in their lies, and let their fear destroy you. You can let the world remember you as a tragic footnote." Her eyes flashed with a brilliant, ambitious light. "Or, you can come with me. You can take that raw, terrifying power they fear so much, and you can forge it. You can sharpen it into a weapon, a tool, a key. You can build a new world, a world that doesn't cower before greatness but bows to it. I have the resources, the vision, and the will. You have the power. Together, we can be unbound." Ash stared at her outstretched hand. He looked at the filth of the alley, the symbol of what the world had reduced him to. He looked at Pikachu, who was watching Lusamine with a wary but curious expression. He thought of his friends' faces, twisted by fear. He thought of his Pokémon, locked away in some sterile facility run by strangers. The fire of his anger, which had been reduced to smoldering embers of despair, was suddenly stoked by her words. She wasn't offering him comfort. She was offering him a purpose. She wasn't offering him revenge. She was offering him a throne. His decision was instant. The boy who always did the right thing, who always turned the other cheek, had died on that balcony. The man who rose in his place was colder, harder, and understood that some things, once broken, could never be put back together. He took her hand. Her grip was firm, confident. "Where are we going?" he asked, his voice clear and steady for the first time since he'd woken up. A true, predatory smile finally graced Lusamine's lips. It was breathtakingly beautiful and utterly terrifying. She helped him to his feet, her gaze never leaving his. "To a new ether paradise," she said, leading him toward the light of the aircraft. "A place where power like yours isn't feared, it's worshipped." As he stepped onto the ramp, leaving the dark, rainy alley behind, He took one last look at the world that had cast him out. He felt no sadness, no regret. Only a cold, burning resolve. They wanted him to be a monster. They wanted him to be a threat. He would not disappoint them. The ramp hissed shut, sealing them inside a luxurious, minimalist interior. Through the reinforced viewport, Ash watched the city shrink below as the craft ascended with impossible speed and silence, piercing the clouds and leaving the storm behind. They emerged into the clear, brilliant light of the moon. Below them, the world was a blanket of darkness and glittering lights. It looked small. It looked fragile. It looked like something that could be remade. Chapter 2. The Gathering of the Unbound. 6 months. 181 days since the world had shattered. Ash marked the time not by a calendar, but by the rhythm of his own transformation. The soft, naive boy who had wept in a rain-soaked alley was a ghost, a memory he regarded with a distant, clinical detachment. The man who existed now was forged in the silent, sterile crucible of Lusamine's ambition. The new ether paradise was a testament to that ambition. It was not a conservation area, it was a fortress, carved into the heart of a jagged, uncharted island wreathed in a perpetual, unnatural storm system that scrambled all conventional navigation. It was a marvel of stealth architecture and bleeding-edge technology. From the air, it was invisible, shielded by holographic projectors that made it appear as another granite peak. Inside, it was a palace of gleaming white corridors, holographic training rooms, state-of-the-art laboratories, and opulent living quarters that overlooked a breathtaking interior biosphere. A captured, sun-drenched jungle teeming with rare and powerful Pokémon, all loyal to Lusamine, thrived under a ceiling that mimicked the sky with perfect accuracy. This was Ash's training ground, his monastery, his armory. He stood in the center of Training Room Gamma, a cavernous chamber where the walls could project any environment, from a volcanic crater to the heart of a blizzard. Today, it was a tranquil bamboo forest under a full moon. His eyes were closed, his breathing slow and even. Across from him stood Absol, one of Lusamine's most formidable Pokémon. The disaster Pokémon was motionless, its white fur a stark contrast to the dark green stalks, its crimson eyes fixed on him. Its curved horn glinted in the simulated moonlight. Pikachu was perched on a rock outcropping to the side, watching with an intensity that matched his own. There was no referee. There were no commands. This wasn't a battle, it was a conversation. Ash's senses were not his own. He felt the whisper of the wind through the bamboo leaves, the shift of a pebble under Absol's paw, the faint electrical hum of Pikachu's static. This was the result of his new training. Lusamine had archives, ancient texts on aura that the Pokémon League had dismissed as myth. He hadn't just been training his body, he had been honing his spirit, sharpening his aura from a blunt instrument of empathy into a razor-fine weapon of perception. Absol moved. It didn't lunge or charge, it simply vanished. One moment it was there, the next it was gone, dissolving into the shadows between the bamboo stalks. Old Ash would have panicked, would have had Pikachu fire off a blind thunderbolt. New Ash remained still. He didn't look, he felt. He felt the subtle disturbance in the air to his left, the barest whisper of displaced energy. Without opening his eyes, he took a half step to his right. A blur of white and black shot past where his head had been, Absol's horn slicing through the air with a lethal whistle. The Pokémon landed silently, spun, and kicked off a bamboo stalk, launching itself at him from a new angle. Ash flowed backward, his movements economical and precise. He felt the attack coming not as a physical threat, but as a spike of intent in the psychic ether of the room. He raised his hand, and a shimmering, blue shield of aura flared to life, barely an inch from his face. Absol's claws scraped against the energy with a sound like grinding metal. The Pokémon used the impact to flip backward, landing 20 feet away. It had been like this for weeks. A silent dance of instinct and energy. He was learning to anticipate, to feel the flow of a battle before it happened. He was learning the language of pure combat. Impressive, a voice said, echoing slightly in the large chamber. Ash's eyes opened. The aura shield dissipated. Lusamine stood in the doorway, clad in a sharp, white business suit. She wasn't smiling, but her eyes held a look of deep, possessive satisfaction, like a master artisan admiring her finest work. Its movements are getting easier to read, Ash said, his voice quiet but clear. He gave Absol a nod of respect, which the Pokémon returned before padding silently over to its master's side. You're not reading its movements, Lusamine corrected, walking toward him, her heels clicking on the polished floor. You're reading its will. There's a difference. One is reactive. The other is predictive. That is the power they were so afraid of. She stopped in front of him, her gaze sweeping over him. The past 6 months had chiseled away his youthful softness. He was leaner, his muscles defined not by bulk but by wiry strength. His face was sharper, the lingering innocence in his eyes replaced by an ironclad certainty. The faint scars from Pikachu's errant thunderbolt were still visible on his chest if you looked closely, a permanent reminder of the price of betrayal. He no longer saw them as a wound. He saw them as a pact. Are you ready? She asked. For what? To stop training and start building, she replied. We are an army of 2, Ash. And while your power is the foundation, a foundation is useless without walls and a roof. We need allies. Not followers. Allies. Individuals with the power and, more importantly, the will to defy the old order. She gestured, and a holographic screen materialized in the air between them. 2 faces appeared. One was a woman with striking pink hair and eyes that seemed to hold a universe of cold indifference. Sabrina, the psychic master of Saffron City. The other was a face known across the globe, a woman of impossible grace and strength, framed by long, blonde hair. Cynthia, the Sinnoh champion. Sabrina is the greatest psychic alive, Lusamine explained, her tone purely strategic. Her reach is unparalleled. She would be our spymaster, our intelligence network, our unseen weapon. She can see truths others can only guess at. And Cynthia? Ash asked, his eyes fixed on the champion's image. He had fought her. He remembered the overwhelming power of her Garchomp, but more than that, he remembered the sharp, analytical mind directing it. Cynthia is a symbol. More than that, she is the most brilliant military tactician the Pokémon League has. But she is shackled by their bureaucracy, by their cowardice. I have been monitoring her communications. She is disillusioned. She has the strength, but she lacks a cause worthy of it. We will provide one. You think they'll just join us? Ash asked, a hint of the old skepticism in his voice. I'm the world's most wanted fugitive. You're a disgraced philanthropist with a history of obsession. Lusamine's lips curved into a faint smile. We will not offer them a job, Ash. We will offer them liberation. Sabrina is isolated by her own power, bored by a world that cannot challenge her. Cynthia is a caged dragon, forced to perform tricks for masters she does not respect. We will offer one a battlefield for the mind, and the other a war worthy of her skills. And you, she said, her eyes locking with his, you will be the one to convince them. They will not follow my money, they will follow your power. Pikachu, sensing the shift in purpose, leapt from the rock onto Ash's shoulder, his posture alert, his gaze fixed on the holographic faces. The time for hiding was over. It was time to gather the storm. Saffron City hadn't changed. It was still a monument to verticality, a concrete and glass forest that scraped the sky. But Ash and Lusamine weren't there for the gleaming corporate towers or the bustling Sylph Company headquarters. Lusamine's intelligence had led them to a quiet, forgotten corner of the city. A traditional Zen garden, nestled between 2 drab apartment blocks, an oasis of serene green in a desert of gray. They waited on a stone bench overlooking a placid koi pond. Lusamine was the picture of patience. Ash, in a simple dark jacket and pants, looked like any other traveler, but his senses were stretched taut, feeling the life of the city around him as a low, constant hum. A ripple disturbed the surface of the pond, though no pebble had been thrown. The air grew heavy, thick with an unseen pressure. A woman's voice, devoid of emotion, echoed not in their ears, but directly in their minds. Less than you are trespassing on private thoughts, Lusamine. And you have brought an anomaly with you. State your purpose before I remove you. Greater than. Ash didn't flinch. He closed his eyes, focusing his own aura inward, then pushing it out not as a shout, but as a clear, focused signal. Less than we're here to talk, Sabrina. Face to face. Greater than there was a pause, a moment of psychic evaluation that felt like a cold probe searching his soul. He felt her touch upon the memory of the betrayal, the sting of the rain in the alley, the cold resolve he had forged in the months since. He didn't shield it, he let her see. Less than intriguing. Very well. Greater than the woman who appeared before them didn't walk into the garden, she simply was. One moment, the space by the pond was empty. The next, Sabrina was there, standing with an unnerving stillness, her pink hair a slash of color against the muted greens. Her eyes were half-lidded, as if she were perpetually bored with the physical world. Beside her, her alakazam materialized, spoons held aloft, its own psychic presence a formidable shield. You have 60 seconds to explain why I shouldn't have my alakazam erase your short-term memories and place you on a train to Johto, Sabrina said, her voice as flat and emotionless as her psychic tone. Because you're bored, Ash stated simply. It wasn't a question. Sabrina's eyebrow twitched, the barest flicker of a reaction. Am I? You're the most powerful psychic on the planet, Ash continued, rising from the bench to face her. You can see the future, read the minds of world leaders from your gym, bend reality with a thought. And you spend your days handing out marsh badges to children. It's not a challenge. It's a cage made of tedium. And you offer what? A life on the run? She countered, her gaze unwavering. I offer you a better game, Ash said, his voice dropping slightly. A bigger board. You see everything. I know you do. You see the lies the League is telling. You see the fear and the rot at its core. You see the strings, but you refuse to pull on them. He took a step closer, ignoring the low hum from Alakazam as it tensed. I'm not asking you to join me. I'm asking you to stop watching the show and come be part of the cast. Lusamine is building an organization outside the old rules. She has the resources. I have the power to break things. We need someone who can see where to apply that power for maximum effect. We need a mind that can wage a war the League doesn't even know is being fought. Sabrina was silent for a long moment. Her gaze intensified, and Ash felt the full force of her psychic power wash over him. It wasn't an attack, it was an invasion. He felt her sift through his memories, his emotions, his very soul. She saw the bright, naive boy from Pallet Town. She saw the joy of his victories, the warmth of his friendships. Then, she saw the shattering. She felt the cold shock of the betrayal as if it were her own. She saw the faces of his friends, twisted by fear and misguided conviction. She felt the searing agony of Pikachu's thunderbolt, not just the physical pain, but the emotional torment of being struck down by the one you love most. She saw the alley, the rain, the despair. And then she saw the fire that Lusamine had ignited. A cold, controlled inferno of pure will. She saw him training, his aura a brilliant, defiant blue. She saw his bond with Pikachu, reforged in the fires of their shared exile, now something deeper, quieter, and infinitely more powerful. He didn't resist her, he let her see it all, but he wasn't passive. As she delved into his mind, he reached out with his own aura, not to attack, but to show her something in return. He didn't show her visions of power or glory. He showed her flashes of her own life from his perspective. He showed her the endless procession of eager, weak trainers. The silence of her gym between battles. The look of fear in the eyes of people who couldn't understand her. He showed her her own profound, crushing loneliness. He showed her a throne in an empty room. Less than you or an outsider, greater than he projected, his thought clear and sharp as glass. Less than so are we. Stop pretending you belong with them. Greater than. Sabrina's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. She stumbled back a step, breaking the connection. Her breath hitched. For the first time, a flicker of genuine emotion crossed her face. Shock. No one had ever pushed back. No one had ever met her on her own terms, in the silent battlefield of the mind. She looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time, not as an anomaly, but as an equal. The Aegis Task Force, she said, her voice now holding a trace of curiosity. The ones who manipulated your friends. They're building something on an abandoned seafaring platform in Hoenn. A weapon to neutralize deific threats. They're using a captured legendary Pokémon as its power source. Lusamine, who had remained silent throughout the exchange, now stepped forward. How do you know this? I can hear the whispers, Sabrina replied, her gaze distant. The fear of the scientists. The fanaticism of the soldiers. And the desperate, psychic cries of the Pokémon they have caged. Her eyes refocused on Ash. If I join you, our first act will be to free it. That was already our plan, Ash said. Sabrina's lips curved into the barest hint of a smile. It was a chilling, fascinating sight. Good. She turned to her Alakazam. There was no verbal command. The Pokémon simply nodded, and in a flash of golden light, they were both gone. A moment later, she reappeared beside Lusamine. her hands clasped behind her back. She was no longer in her gym attire, but in a simple, practical dark dress. She had made her choice. The saffron gym is now vacant, she announced calmly. Where to next? Lusamine's smile was one of pure triumph. Next, she said, looking at the holographic screen that only she could see, we attend a press conference. The Pokémon League headquarters in Winden was in a state of controlled panic. In the 6 months since Ash's incident and subsequent disappearance, the League had been fighting a losing battle for control of the narrative. Rumors were spreading. Whispers of a conspiracy, of the champion being silenced. They needed to project an image of strength and unity. Their solution was a grand press conference. The League president, a portly man named Roswell whose face was perpetually beaded with sweat, stood at a podium flanked by the remaining Elite Four members of various regions. The chamber was packed with journalists from every major news outlet in the world, their cameras flashing like a swarm of angry scolipede. The main event, the reason everyone was there, was Cynthia. The Sinnoh champion was their ace in the hole. Beloved, respected, and undefeated for years, her word carried more weight than President Roswell's ever could. She was expected to formally condemn Ash Ketchum, to label him a rogue agent, and to reaffirm the League's authority. She strode to the podium with her customary grace, a regal figure in her black coat. The room fell silent. Cameras zoomed in, microphones strained to catch her first words. President Roswell gave her a nervous, encouraging smile. Champion Cynthia will now share her perspective on the grave threat posed by the fugitive, Ash Ketchum. Cynthia adjusted the microphone, her cool gray eyes sweeping over the assembled press. She took a deep breath. I have been asked to speak today about Ash Ketchum, she began, her voice calm and clear, carrying to every corner of the room. I am told he is a threat. A danger. An anomaly that must be contained for the good of the world. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. I am also told that the Pokémon League is the bastion of order and safety in our world. That it is the final authority on what is right and just for trainers and Pokémon alike. She looked directly at President Roswell, whose smile was beginning to look strained. I have found, however, that these two statements are mutually exclusive. I cannot, in good conscience, accept both as truth. A murmur went through the crowd. Roswell's face went pale. I have reviewed the data, Cynthia continued, her voice gaining an edge of steel. I have spoken with sources inside the Galar League, and I have come to a simple, undeniable conclusion. The Pokémon League did not contain a threat. It created one. You took a boy who embodied the very spirit of what we claim to represent, the bond between human and Pokémon, the courage to face any challenge, the heart of a true champion, and you allowed fear and paranoia, whispered by a shadow organization with no public accountability, to guide your hand. The room was now utterly silent, the only sound the frantic clicking of cameras. You did not lose a champion, you threw one away, she declared, her voice ringing with conviction. You branded him a fugitive because you were too cowardly to stand up for him. You have chosen to govern through fear, and fear is a poor substitute for wisdom. It is a poison, and it has rotted the foundations of this institution. She reached up and undid the clasp of the small, intricate pin on her coat, the symbol of her status as Sinnoh champion. I cannot represent an organization I no longer respect. I cannot be the face of an institution that so readily devours its own. The world needs protectors, yes. But it needs protectors who are not afraid of true power. It needs leaders with the strength to nurture greatness, not extinguish it. She placed the pin on the podium with a soft, definitive click. Therefore, effective immediately, I renounce the title of Sinnoh champion. My Pokémon and I will forge our own path. One where strength is celebrated, not feared. I suggest you spend less time hunting ghosts and more time examining the rot within your own house. Without another word, she turned and walked off the stage. The room erupted into absolute chaos. Reporters were shouting questions, running to file their stories. League officials were scrambling, their faces a mask of horror and disbelief. President Roswell looked as if he might faint. Cynthia didn't look back. She walked calmly through the pandemonium, a solitary, determined figure cutting a path through the storm she had just unleashed. In the back of a black, unmarked luxury vehicle parked 2 blocks away, Lusamine watched the live feed on a tablet, a slow, predatory smile spreading across her face. Sabrina sat opposite her, her expression unreadable but for a flicker of approval in her eyes. Ash stood outside the car, leaning against the door, listening to the feed through a small earpiece. He heard Cynthia's final words, felt the shockwave they sent through the world. He felt a surge of respect for the woman. She hadn't just quit. She had burned the whole system down on her way out the door. A moment later, his personal data pad, a gift from Lusamine, buzzed. It was a secure, encrypted message. It contained no text, only a set of coordinates and a single audio file. He played it. Cynthia's voice came through, crisp and clear. "Lusamine. It's Cynthia. I believe you have a vacancy for a strategist with a Garchomp. And I'm tired of playing defense." Ash looked up at the sky, a rare smile touching his lips. The foundation was laid. The walls were rising. They gathered in the Ether Paradise's main command center, a room that looked like something out of a science fiction epic. A massive, holographic map of the world floated in the center, shimmering with data streams. Lusamine, Ash, a newly arrived Cynthia, and Sabrina stood around it. It was the first time they were all together. The air was electric with potential. Cynthia, practical as ever, got straight to the point. "Sabrina has briefed me on the Aegis facility. A full frontal assault is suicide. Their technology is advanced, and their numbers are superior." "An assault is not my style," Lusamine countered smoothly. "Subterfuge is far more elegant, and far more effective." "We'll need a diversion," Cynthia mused, her eyes scanning the holographic layout of the sea fortress that Sabrina had projected from her own mind. Something big enough to draw their main forces away from the primary target. "We'll hit their supply lines," Ash said, speaking for the first time. The other three turned to him. "They have to have a primary staging area on the mainland. We create a significant problem there, draw out their elite response team. While they're occupied, a smaller infiltration unit goes for the core." Cynthia nodded, a look of professional appraisal in her eyes. "A classic pincer movement. I like it. Who makes up the infiltration unit?" "Me," Ash said without hesitation. "And Pikachu. We move fastest. You, Cynthia, will lead the diversion. Hit them hard and fast. Show them what a real champion's power looks like." It was a solid plan. Logical. Efficient. "It's time we gave ourselves a name," Lusamine said, interrupting the strategic planning. "A symbol for the world to rally behind, or to fear. We are no longer bound by the League's laws, by their morality, by their fear. We are free." She looked at each of them in turn, her eyes burning with intensity. "We are the unbound." The name settled over them, fitting perfectly. It was a declaration of intent. As they finalized their plans, Sabrina suddenly went rigid. "Broadcast," she whispered, her eyes losing focus. "He's making a global address." Lusamine tapped a command into her wrist-mounted device, and the central hologram shifted. It now showed a live newsfeed. The man on the screen was handsome, with sharp, patrician features, piercing blue eyes, and slicked-back dark hair. He wore a crisp, dark gray military uniform adorned with a single, stylized silver shield. The Aegis. He stood before a backdrop of world flags, his expression one of calm, unwavering conviction. The Chiron identified him. "Commander Jaeger, Aegis Task Force." "My fellow citizens of the world," Jaeger began, his voice a smooth, charismatic baritone that commanded attention. "In recent days, you have been subjected to a narrative of chaos. A disgraced champion has abandoned her post. A dangerous fugitive remains at large. The very institutions meant to protect you seem to be crumbling. I am here to tell you, do not be afraid." He leaned forward slightly, his gaze seeming to pierce the screen. "For too long, we have lived under the capricious whims of so-called legendary Pokémon. Deific beings whose squabbles can rewrite coastlines, whose tantrums can shatter time itself. We have been taught to revere them, to fear them. The Aegis Task Force believes in a different path. A path of human ingenuity. A path of control." He gestured to images that appeared beside him. Latios and Latias, Groudon and Kyogre, Dialga and Palkia. These are not gods. They are weapons. Immensely powerful, biological weapons that pose an existential threat to the continued survival of the human race. And those individuals who can inexplicably influence them, like the fugitive Ash Ketchum, are not blessed. They are catalysts for disaster. We will not allow our collective fate to be tied to the whims of one unstable boy and his monstrous pets. His voice swelled with righteous fervor. "Aegis offers a new promise. A world where humanity is the master of its own destiny. Where our safety is guaranteed not by prayer, but by our own strength and resolve. We will neutralize these threats. We will bring them under our control. We will secure our future. Order will be restored. The broadcast ended. Cynthia was scowling. He's good. He's turning fear into a political platform. He is more than that, Sabrina whispered, her hand pressed to her temple. She was staring at the frozen image of Jaeger on the screen. What do you see? Ash asked, noticing her distress. Behind the man, behind the conviction, there is something else. A hunger. An emptiness that wants to consume everything. It is not his own. Her eyes were wide with a fear Ash had not seen in her before. When he speaks of control, it listens. When he yearns for order, it whispers promises. Ash looked at the screen, at the handsome, confident face of his new enemy. And for a fraction of a second, he saw it too. A faint, almost imperceptible shimmer in the air behind Jaeger's head. A flicker of darkness that seemed to twist the light around it, like heat haze off asphalt. The audio of the broadcast had been crystal clear, but in his memory of it, Ash could now isolate a sound he'd missed. A faint, sibilant whisper hiding beneath Jaeger's smooth words. A sound like static from a dead channel. The Unbound had their name. They had their mission. And Ash Ketchum finally had a face to put to the architects of his fall. But as he stared at the screen, a cold certainty settled in his gut. Jaeger was not the true enemy. He was merely the vessel. The real war was just beginning. Chapter 3. The Aegis Gambit. The command center of the Ether Paradise was a cathedral of information. Light and data flowed in silent, holographic rivers across the air, coalescing into a three-dimensional, fully rendered schematic of their target. It floated in the center of the room, a ghost of steel and concrete. Fortress Maelstrom. The Aegis Task Force had chosen their location well. It was a repurposed deep-sea drilling platform, retrofitted into a military installation, anchored in the treacherous, storm-racked waters of the Sea of Mavel. A fortress in the heart of a tempest. It's a masterpiece of defensive architecture, Cynthia observed, her arms crossed as she circled the hologram. Her voice held the grudging respect of one strategist for another. Limited angle approaches by air and sea. Subsurface sonar grid. Long-range energy sensors. The entire superstructure is reinforced to withstand a direct assault from a legendary class Pokémon. They're not just prepared for a fight, they're expecting one. Arrogant, Lusamine commented from her position at the primary control console. She wore a pristine white jumpsuit, looking less like a combatant and more like the director of this deadly orchestra. They believe their technology makes them impervious. It's a flaw we will exploit. Sabrina stood motionless beside the hologram, her eyes closed. She was not looking at the schematic, she was experiencing it. 3 primary command hubs, she said, her voice a low monotone. North, West, and Central. The majority of their elite guard and heavy armor are quartered in the North and West wings, ready to respond to any external threat. The Central Core is a lower security zone, dedicated to research and engineering. And the power source, Ash finished, his eyes fixed on the pulsating heart of the holographic fortress. That's where they're holding it. Sabrina nodded. Its psychic signature is frayed. Exhausted. They're draining it. Latius. Her grief is a constant, high-pitched scream in the back of my mind. A cold anger, sharp and precise, tightened in Ash's chest. This was what Jaeger's order looked like. A creature of emotion and freedom, caged and bled dry to power a machine. Cynthia, Ash said, his voice drawing the attention of everyone in the room. You'll lead the diversion. You'll hit the mainland supply depot at Slateport's industrial sector. Don't hold back. I want you to be so loud, so destructive, that Jaeger has no choice but to deploy his best from the fortress to deal with you. Cynthia's lips curved into a dangerous smile. A public demonstration of why renouncing a title doesn't mean renouncing one's power. I can do that. Garchomp could use the exercise. Lusamine, Ash continued, turning to her. You're our eye in the sky. Communications, transport, and real-time support. We'll need a clean entry and a cleaner exit. No one is better at making things appear and disappear than you. Lusamine inclined her head, a silent acknowledgement of her role. She lived for this, for the application of immense resources toward a singular, audacious goal. Sabrina, you're with me, Ash said. Not on the ground. You'll be our psychic overwatch. You'll run interference, blind their sensors, cloud the minds of their patrols. You are the ghost in their machine. I will be a nightmare they won't remember having, Sabrina confirmed, her eyes opening. They held a chilling focus. And me? Lusamine asked, a hint of challenge in her voice. You would have me simply be your pilot? No, Ash replied, meeting her gaze. You're the one who pulls the strings, and I need a Pokémon from your private collection. Something fast. Something quiet. Something that moves through shadows. Lusamine's smile returned, wider this time. She understood. He wasn't just using her resources, he was integrating them, bonding with them. It was a sign of trust, of partnership. I have just the one. He's been waiting for a trainer with the reflexes to keep up with him. The plan was set. A brutal, overwhelming hammer blow to draw the enemy's eye, and a surgical, silent incision to carve out its heart. It was the first move for the Unbound. It would be their declaration of war. The storm that perpetually shrouded Fortress Maelstrom was a living entity. Rain fell in horizontal sheets, driven by gale-force winds that shrieked like tortured spirits. Waves, the size of small mountains, crashed against the platform's thick legs, sending plumes of white spray hundreds of feet into the air. This was nature's fury, a perfect shield for Aegis's secrets. Simultaneously, 50 miles away, a different kind of storm was breaking over Slateport City. Cynthia stood on the rooftop of a silent, automated warehouse, the wind whipping her long blonde hair around her. Below, the Aegis supply depot was a hive of activity. Trucks were being loaded with munitions, fuel tankers were being filled, and squads of Aegis soldiers in their gray and silver armor marched with chilling efficiency. Her Garchomp stood beside her, a silhouette of barely contained power, its scythe-like arms crossed, its yellow eyes glowing in the twilight. They believe they own the night, Cynthia murmured, more to herself than to her Pokémon. Let's remind them who it truly belongs to. She didn't shout a command. She simply met her Garchomp's gaze and gave a subtle nod. That was all it took. Garchomp leapt from the roof, a dark meteor descending upon the depot. It landed with the force of an explosion, the ground cracking under its feet. For a moment, there was stunned silence. Then, the alarms blared. The first response was a squad of soldiers, their advanced plasma rifles aimed at the intruder. Unidentified Pokémon, open fire, a commander yelled. Bolts of incandescent blue energy shot through the air. Garchomp didn't even bother to dodge. It simply raised one arm, and the bolts harmlessly dissipated against its rough, armored hide. It let out a guttural roar that was pure, unadulterated dominance, a sound that shook the very foundations of the depot. Then, Cynthia gave her first real command, her voice cutting through the chaos. Draco Meteor. Garchomp tilted its head to the sky and unleashed a piercing cry. High above, the clouds themselves seemed to tear open. A sphere of brilliant orange energy formed, then shattered, sending a dozen smaller meteorites of draconic power screaming down onto the depot. The effect was cataclysmic. Trucks exploded in blossoms of fire and shrapnel. A fuel tanker went up in a fireball that turned night into day, its shockwaves shattering every window for half a mile. The carefully ordered depot was transformed into a landscape of flame, twisted metal, and panicked shouting. From the command center of Fortress Maelstrom, Commander Jaeger watched the satellite feed of Slateport, his face a mask of cold fury. Report, he snapped. Sir, it's Cynthia, the former Sinnoh champion. An operator called out, his voice tight with panic. She's single-handedly destroying the depot. Our forces are being overwhelmed. Jaeger's jaw clenched. The public humiliation of her defection was one thing. This brazen, direct assault was another. It was a challenge. A gauntlet thrown down for the entire world to see. She's trying to draw us out, he growled, his mind racing. It was too bold, too direct. A diversion. For what? He scanned the fortress's sensor readings. All green. No external threats detected. The storm was as impenetrable as ever. She thinks she can play games with me, he muttered. He would not be made a fool of. He would meet this overwhelming force with his own. Deploy the Skyla Squadron, he commanded, his voice ice. All elite units. I want her and that Garchomp captured. Subdue her. Make an example of her. On the bridge of the fortress, officers scrambled to obey. Hangar bay doors opened, and sleek, heavily armed gunships lifted into the shrieking wind, their engines fighting against the storm as they banked hard toward the mainland. The fortress's most powerful defenders, its veteran Pokémon and elite human soldiers, were being sent to answer Cynthia's challenge. Jaeger watched them go, a grim satisfaction on his face. He had taken the bait, and in doing so, he had left his front door wide open. Beneath the raging waves, all was silent. The sleek, black submersible, the Nile, moved like a shark through the crushing dark, its advanced hull designed to mimic the sonar signature of a large marine Pokémon. Inside, the atmosphere was calm and focused. Ash sat cross-legged on the floor, his eyes closed. Across from him, a new partner sat in the same pose. Greninja. The Pokémon was a gift from Lusamine, a master of stealth and speed. It was dark blue, almost black in the dim light of the sub, its long tongue wrapped around its neck like a scarf. It was the physical embodiment of a shadow. For the past hour, Ash and Greninja had been in silent communication, not through words, but through aura. Ash had extended his senses, linking his consciousness with the Pokémon's, feeling its sharp instincts, its fluid grace, its unwavering focus. It was a bond forged in moments, but it felt as deep as any he had ever known. Pikachu was perched on a console, his ears twitching, acting as a living energy sensor. Less than we are approaching the primary leg, ALPHA7, greater than Lusamine's voice echoed in the sub. A calm presence in the deep. Less than Sabrina, are you ready? Greater than. From the ether paradise, miles away, Sabrina sat in a darkened meditation chamber, her Alakazam's spoons glowing softly beside her. Less than ready. Their sensor network is crude. Like a net with holes big enough to fly a jet through. I am weaving a psychic blanket over our approach vector. To their systems, we will be nothing more than a school of Lovedisk caught in the current, greater than. Ash, the access point is a maintenance hatch 30 meters below the surface, Lusamine informed him. It's triple sealed and pressure sensitive. Won't matter, Ash said, opening his eyes. They glowed with a faint, blue light. He looked at Greninja, who opened its own crimson eyes. They were ready. The Nile slowed to a stop, its grappling arms extending to clamp onto the massive metal leg of the platform. The outer hatch opened, and the cold, pressurized water of the deep sea flooded the small airlock. Ash, wearing a simple rebreather and a dark, form-fitting wetsuit, gave Greninja a nod. They slipped into the water, silent as ghosts. The maintenance hatch was exactly as described, a thick circle of reinforced steel, held in place by 3 heavy mag locks. Ash placed his palm against the cold metal. He closed his eyes, extending his aura not as a force, but as a fine, intricate key. He felt the inner workings of the lock, the flow of electricity, the magnetic tumblers. He didn't force it. He persuaded it. A faint pulse of blue energy, visible for only a second in the murky water, flowed from his hand. With a soft thump that was felt more than heard, the mag locks disengaged. The heavy hatch swung inward. They slipped inside, entering a flooded maintenance tube. Greninja, perfectly at home in the water, took the lead. They navigated the dark, cramped tunnels for several minutes before surfacing in a small, deserted maintenance bay. The air was heavy with the smell of ozone and machine oil. Less than you're in, greater than Sabrina's voice whispered in his mind. Less than the first patrols or 2 corridors down. They are complacent. Bored. Their minds are full of idle thoughts about card games and what's for dinner. Easy to misdirect. Greater than. Greninja, shadows. Pikachu, with me, Ash whispered. Greninja melted into the corners of the corridor, becoming one with the darkness. Ash and Pikachu moved down the center of the hall, their footsteps making no sound on the metal grating. They came to a junction. Ash flattened himself against the wall. He could hear the heavy tread of 2 guards approaching. Less than they will turn right, greater than Sabrina projected. Less than I have planted the suggestion that they heard a noise from a storage closet down that hall. Greater than. As predicted, the 2 Aegis soldiers, their rifles held loosely, turned right at the junction, never even glancing in Ash's direction. Ash and Pikachu slipped past, moving deeper into the facility. It was a deadly ballet. Sabrina was his choreographer, painting a false reality for their enemies. Ash was the lead dancer, his aura his partner, allowing him to bypass systems that should have been impassable. He didn't hack doors. He pulsed them with just enough energy to trick their sensors into thinking he had the right keycard. He didn't dodge cameras. A flicker of his aura would feed them a looped image of an empty hallway for the few seconds he needed to pass. Greninja was a phantom. A whisper of movement in the periphery, ready to act if stealth failed. They moved with a speed and efficiency that would have been impossible for a normal infiltration team. They were not fighting the fortress. They were flowing through its cracks, exploiting the one thing Jaeger's technology couldn't account for: the power of the unseen. They finally reached the entrance to the central core. It was a massive circular blast door, emblazoned with the Aegis shield. 2 elite guards stood watch, their posture alert. Their Pokémon, a powerful Metagross and a sleek, intimidating Bisharp, standing ready. These were not the bored grunts from the outer corridors. Less than these are different, greater than. Sabrina's voice was strained. Less than their minds are shielded. A side effect of their advanced combat helmets. I cannot influence them directly, greater than. Then we do this the old-fashioned way, Ash murmured. He looked to the shadows on his right. A flicker of movement was his only reply. Pikachu, agility, Ash whispered. Pikachu shot forward, a yellow blur. The guards, startled by the sudden movement, raised their rifles. Intruder! Sound the alar. The guard's shout was cut off as Greninja dropped from the ceiling, a silent black bolt of lightning. A water shuriken, formed in an instant, slapped into the alarm panel on the wall, shorting it out with a shower of sparks. Simultaneously, Greninja landed and swept a leg out, taking the first guard off his feet. Metagross, use Meteor Mash, the other guard commanded. The colossal steel Pokémon rocketed forward, its claws glowing with cosmic energy, but Ash was already moving. Pikachu, Electroweb. Pikachu, moving with incredible speed, leapt into the air and spat a sticky, electrified net. It didn't hit Metagross. It hit the floor right in front of it. The Pokémon's charge carried it right into the trap, its metal feet instantly getting stuck. The electrical current surged through its body, causing it to seize up. Bisharp, Night Slash. The blade-covered Pokémon lunged at Ash, its arms glinting like razors. But a dark shape intercepted it. Greninja met Bisharp's blades with its own kunai made of compressed water, the two engaging in a blindingly fast duel of flashing steel and water. The fight was over in less than 10 seconds. While Greninja kept Bisharp occupied, Ash strode past the struggling Metagross and delivered a precise, aura-enhanced chop to the back of the second guard's neck. The man collapsed without a sound. Greninja, seeing its opening, feinted left and then used its incredible speed to get behind Bisharp, tapping it on the head with the hilt of a water kunai. The surprise and the sheer speed of the maneuver were enough to stun the Pokémon into inaction. Greninja then dealt with the first guard with equal, non-lethal efficiency. Silence returned. 2 guards and their powerful Pokémon, neutralized without a single fatal blow or a single alarm raised. Ash placed his hand on the blast door's control panel. This one was more complex. He closed his eyes, channeling his aura. He felt the complex web of electronic and biometric locks. He didn't try to bypass them, he overloaded them. With a groan of protesting metal, the massive blast door slid open. The room beyond was cold and sterile. A circular chamber, dominated by a huge, spherical energy containment field in the center. Inside the sphere, bathed in a sickening green light, was Latias. She was floating listlessly, her red and white body pale, her eyes closed. Thick cables ran from the containment field to a massive, complex cannon-like device that was aimed at the ceiling. This was Jaeger's weapon. And Latias was its battery. As Ash stepped into the room, Latias's eyes fluttered open. He felt her mind touch his, a weak, terrified probe. Less than who are you? Greater than. He didn't answer with words. He answered with his aura, letting its warm, blue light wash over her psychic senses. He projected feelings of safety, of liberation, of a shared connection to the world that Jaeger sought to dominate. Relief flooded their mental link, so potent it was almost overwhelming. Less than the light, it's like the sun, greater than. We're getting you out of here, Ash said, his voice soft. Not so fast, Anomaly. The voice was cold, sharp, and laced with arrogant confidence. Ash spun around. Standing in a previously hidden doorway was a man in a modified Aegis uniform, black instead of gray. He was tall, with severe features and hair so blonde it was almost white. He had an air of cruel intelligence about him. This was no mere guard. Lieutenant Kessler, the man introduced himself, a condescending smirk on his face. head of internal security. I must admit, I'm impressed. Bypassing our entire security network without tripping a single silent alarm, you truly are a freak of nature. Beside Kessler, a massive magnezone floated, its 3 bodies humming with electromagnetic power. Let her go, Kessler, Ash said, his tone flat and devoid of warmth. Pikachu and Greninja moved to flank him, their bodies tense. Let her go? Kessler laughed, a short, barking sound. This, her, is a tool. A resource. A means to an end. The end of chaos. The beginning of true, human-led order. Something your simple, Pokemon-coddling mind cannot comprehend. You and your kind are an evolutionary dead end, a dangerous variable in a world we are trying to solve. You call me a variable because you can't control me, Ash countered, his voice dropping to a dangerous low. The air in the room grew heavy. You call me an anomaly because you can't comprehend power you don't control. That's not a philosophy. It's just fear, dressed up in a fancy uniform. Kessler's smirk vanished, replaced by a snarl. You will be a fascinating case study. Take him down. The magnezone unleashed a massive zap cannon. The ball of electricity was huge, unstable, and incredibly powerful. Ash didn't even flinch. Greninja, Water Shuriken. Pikachu, Thunderbolt. Intercepted. No shouting, no wasted motion. A silent pulse of intent was all it took. Greninja unleashed a volley of razor-sharp spinning stars made of water. Pikachu unleashed a perfectly controlled, rapier-thin bolt of lightning. The 3 attacks met in the center of the room. The Zap Cannon, a weapon of brute force, was destabilized by the precision of the other 2 attacks. It detonated prematurely in a blinding flash of light and a deafening crash, scorching the walls but leaving Ash and his team untouched. Impossible. Kessler breathed, taking an involuntary step back. Before the light had even fully faded, Ash gave his next silent command. Greninja vanished. Where did it? Kessler started to ask, but was cut off as Greninja reappeared directly behind his magnezone, having used the flash of the explosion as cover. Double team. Now. In an instant, the room was filled with a dozen illusory copies of Greninja, all of them moving, weaving, a whirlwind of blue and black that surrounded the confused magnezone. It's a trick. Use flash cannon, blast them all, Kessler screamed, his composure finally breaking. The magnezone's central eye began to glow, gathering energy, but it was too slow. Pikachu. Iron Tail. From the chaos of the double team, Pikachu launched himself like a rocket. His tail glowed with the metallic sheen of the move, and he spun like a drill. He wasn't aiming for Magnezone's main body. He was aiming for the delicate joint that connected its upper magnet to the central sphere. The impact was precise, surgical. There was a sharp crack of metal, and the Magnezone let out a discordant screech of pain and surprise as one of its primary components was disabled. It wobbled in the air, its power output fluctuating wildly. The real Greninja then dropped from the ceiling, a massive water shuriken, the size of a shield, spinning in its hand. It slammed the shuriken down on the Magnezone, not cutting it, but using the immense hydro pressure to pin it to the floor. The battle was over. Kessler stared in disbelief, his mouth agape. His prize Pokemon, one of Aegis's best, defeated in under 30 seconds by a display of speed, synergy, and strategy he couldn't even follow. Ash walked calmly toward him, Pikachu and Greninja falling into step beside him. Kessler, his bravado shattered, fumbled for a sidearm. He never got the chance to draw it. Ash's hand shot out and grabbed his wrist, his grip like steel. It's over, Ash said, his voice cold as the deep sea. He effortlessly relieved Kessler of his weapon and pushed him against the wall. Shut down the containment field. Kessler, his face pale with fear and humiliation, just stared. With a sigh of annoyance, Ash turned to the control panel himself. Again, his hand glowed with blue light. He wasn't a scientist, but he didn't need to be. He could feel the flow of energy. He found the core command sequence and, with a surge of aura, forced it. The machine groaned. The cables retracted, and the green energy sphere around Latias flickered and died. She drifted weakly to the floor, her energy almost completely depleted. Ash rushed to her side, kneeling. He placed a hand on her head, channeling his aura again, not as a weapon, but as a healing balm, a pure transfer of his own life force. Latias's psychic voice, though still weak, was filled with overwhelming gratitude. Less than you, You saved me, greater than. Less than he saves everyone, greater than a new, familiar voice echoed in Ash's mind. It was Latios's twin, who had been drawn by her cries and was now circling the fortress. Less than we are in your debt, Ash Ketchum. Greater than. Suddenly, the fortress shuddered. Red lights began to flash. An automated voice blared over the intercom. Warning. Containment failure in central core. Reactor overload imminent. Evacuate. Evacuate. Kessler's eyes went wide with panic, then narrowed with spite. If I can't have the weapon, no one can. Forcing the shutdown without the proper sequence initiated a feedback loop. The whole platform will be vaporized in 10 minutes. Cynthia's voice crackled to life in Ash's earpiece. Ash, what's going on? Jaeger just recalled his forces. They're retreating back to the fortress at full speed, and we're reading a massive energy spike from your position. They had a choice. They could escape, leave the Aegis forces to be consumed in the explosion, and deal a devastating blow to Jaeger's operation. It was a tactical victory. Cynthia saw it immediately. Ash, this is our chance. We can cripple his entire command structure. It's a necessary sacrifice. Ash looked at the cowering, defeated Kessler. He thought of the bored guards in the hallways, the technicians, the cooks, the janitors. The hundreds of people on this platform who were just doing a job, pawns in Jaeger's game. No, Ash said, his voice absolute. There was no hesitation. We're not them. We don't sacrifice people. He turned back to the overloading reactor. He could feel the unstable energy churning within it, a chaotic storm threatening to break loose. Lusamine, get the Nile ready for a fast pickup. Cynthia, tell Latios to help you slow down Jaeger's returning fleet. Buy me some time. Time for what? Lusamine asked, her voice tight with concern. To fix this, Ash said simply. He walked toward the reactor, ignoring Kessler's shocked stare. He placed both his hands on the humming casing. He closed his eyes and plunged his consciousness, his very essence, into the heart of the machine. He wasn't a mechanic. He was an Aura Guardian. And what was a runaway reactor but a Pokemon in pain, its energy wild and untamed? He didn't fight the chaos. He embraced it. He found the flow of energy, the runaway chain reaction, and with his own aura, he began to guide it, to soothe it, to bring it back under control. Blue light enveloped him, arcing from his body to the machine. It was agony. It felt like holding back an ocean, but he held firm. Slowly, painstakingly, the screaming alarms began to quiet. The flashing red lights returned to a steady yellow. The overload warning ceased. He had stabilized it. He collapsed to his knees, sweat beading on his forehead, his body trembling with exhaustion. Latios, having recovered a sliver of strength, floated over and nudged him gently, her psychic presence a wave of comfort and awe. They escaped minutes later, picked up by the silent black submersible. They left Kessler and his men unharmed on a stable, if crippled, platform. They had achieved their primary objective, and they had done it without becoming the monsters Jaeger claimed they were. In his darkened command center, Jaeger watched the final security log from the central core. The video was grainy, corrupted by the energy fluctuations, but the images were clear enough. He saw Ash's impossible infiltration. He saw the swift, brutal efficiency of his Pokemon. He saw the casual way he defeated Lieutenant Kessler, one of his best men. But it was the last part that made Jaeger's blood run cold. He watched as Ash, a lone figure against a machine on the brink of self-destruction, placed his hands on it and, through sheer force of will, tamed it. He hadn't just disarmed a bomb. He had communed with it. He had bent the laws of physics to his will with nothing but the power inside him. This wasn't a rogue trainer. This wasn't an anomaly. This was a god in human form. The fear Jaeger had been stoking in the world now took root in his own heart. A cold, profound terror. His technology, his soldiers, his strategies, they were all children's toys in the face of this. He was outmatched on a level he couldn't even comprehend. He switched off the monitor, plunging the room into darkness. He was alone. Or, he appeared to be. He turned toward the darkest corner of the room, where the shadows seemed deeper, colder, than they should. I was wrong, Jaeger whispered, his charismatic voice now thin and reedy with fear. My methods are insufficient. He is more powerful than I ever imagined. A faint, sibilant hiss answered him from the shadows, a sound like dry leaves skittering across pavement. It was a voice that spoke not to his ears, but to the fear in his soul. To control him, I need more, Jaeger pleaded, his composure finally shattering. He was no longer a commander. He was a supplicant. I need a power that can match his. A power that can unmake what he protects. He took a step toward the darkness, his arms open in a gesture of surrender. What more can you give me? The shadows in the corner did not answer with words. They stirred. They deepened. A thick, black, viscous tendril of pure nothingness, a sliver of the void, slithered out from the darkness. It moved with a slow, deliberate purpose, not like a living thing, but like a crack forming in the fabric of reality itself. It coiled in the air before him, radiating an anti-energy that seemed to leach the warmth from the room. Jaeger did not flinch. He watched, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and ravenous ambition. This was the answer. This was the power he needed. The tendril of shadow lashed out, not to strike him, but to touch him. It pressed against his chest, right over his heart. It did not burn. It did not freeze. It simply seeped in. It poured into him like ink into water, a torrent of cold, hungry emptiness that promised absolute power at the price of his humanity. He gasped, his back arching, his eyes rolling back in his head. The faint, dark shimmer that had once hovered behind him was now inside him, a cancer of the soul. When his eyes focused again, they were no longer a piercing blue. They were voids, endless black pits that held the chilling light of a dead star. Commander Jaeger was gone. In his place stood something new. An avatar. A weapon. The first true soldier of the Null. Chapter 4. Ghosts of Pallid Town. The weeks following the Aegis Gambit were a blur of calculated motion. The Unbound were no longer a theoretical threat, they were a proven force. The world was in an uproar. News of Cynthia's assault on Slateport and the impossible infiltration of Fortress Maelstrom spread like wildfire, painting a confusing picture. Some saw the Unbound as dangerous terrorists, validating Jaeger's fearmongering. Others, disillusioned with the League's weakness, saw them as vigilante heroes, the only ones willing to challenge Aegis's growing power. The Unbound themselves cared little for the debate. They were busy. Sabrina, now fully integrated, became their shadow master. From her chamber in the Ether Paradise, she reached out with her mind, weaving a web of psychic intelligence across the globe. She intercepted Aegis communications, tracked their troop movements, and identified their hidden assets. She became a one-woman intelligence agency, feeding Cynthia the data she needed to plan their next moves. Cynthia, in turn, became their sword. With Lusamine providing untraceable transport and logistical support, she led a series of lightning-fast, surgical strikes. They didn't target civilians or public infrastructure. They targeted Aegis. A convoy of experimental weaponry vanished in the mountains of Johto. A secret Aegis research outpost in the Unova Desert went dark overnight, its staff waking up in the morning to find every piece of equipment and data wiped clean. Cynthia's Garchomp and Lusamine's strange, powerful Pokémon, a lithe Salazzle that commanded with toxic authority, a Beware whose cuddly appearance belied crushing strength, became specters haunting Jaeger's operations. They never stayed to fight a prolonged battle, only to strike, disrupt, and vanish, leaving confusion and failure in their wake. And Ash? Ash was their heart and their purpose. He was in Sinnoh, at the edge of the vast, tranquil Lake Verity. With him were Latios and Latias, the Eon twins now his fierce and devoted allies. Latias was still recovering, her psychic energy slowly replenishing under the lake's calming influence. But her physical wounds were healing faster, thanks to Ash. He wasn't using potions or Pokémon centers. He was using his aura, spending hours each day in a meditative state, his own life force flowing into her, knitting her spiritual wounds back together. It was a quiet time, a necessary respite from the storm. He and the Eon twins developed a unique rapport, communicating not with words, but with shared emotions and images. They showed him soaring vistas from high above the clouds, the world a patchwork of green and blue. He, in turn, shared his own memories. The taste of a fresh-baked pastry in Kalos, the scent of the pine forests around Mount Silver, the feeling of Pikachu's fur against his cheek. It was a bond of pure empathy, a reminder of what he was fighting for. Pikachu and Greninja were his constant companions, one a familiar anchor to his past, the other a symbol of his new future. They trained not for power, but for synergy, their movements becoming so intertwined they could anticipate each other's actions with a mere glance. He was sitting on the grassy shore one afternoon, watching Latius playfully chase a school of Magikarp under the water's surface, when he felt it. A familiar presence. A psychic signature he hadn't felt in months. Latius felt it too. She surfaced instantly, her head turning towards the forest path, a low, worried trill emanating from her. Ash stood up, his body tensing. He didn't need Sabrina to tell him who was coming. He could feel their approach in the very air. The heavy, earthy resolve of Brock. The rushing, tumultuous spirit of Misty. And the soft, conflicted heart of Serena. They were here. He hadn't expected them to find him. This place was supposed to be secret, a sanctuary. But he had underestimated them. Or rather, he had underestimated the desperation of the Pokémon League. Shamed by Cynthia's defection and unable to counter the Unbound's guerrilla tactics, they had fallen back on the one strategy they had left. Emotional blackmail. They had sent the ghosts of Pallet Town to haunt him. Pikachu leapt onto his shoulder, his body rigid, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Greninja materialized from the shadows of the trees behind Ash, its posture a study in lethal stillness. Latios descended from the clouds, landing silently on the shore beside his sister, his protective gaze fixed on the approaching figures. The three of them emerged from the tree line. They looked older, wearier. The past 6 months had not been kind to them. Brock's easygoing demeanor was gone, replaced by a grim determination. Misty's fiery confidence had been tempered into a hard, brittle anger. And Serena, she looked heartbroken, her eyes red-rimmed, as if she hadn't had a peaceful night's sleep since the betrayal. They stopped about 50 feet away, their Pokémon emerging to stand with them. Brock's Steelix, its massive form towering over the trees. Misty's Gyarados, its fangs bared in an instinctual show of aggression. And Serena's Delphox, its fiery wand held at the ready. They weren't here for a friendly reunion. They were here on a mission. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The only sound was the gentle lapping of the lake and the tense hum of power in the air. It was Serena who broke the silence, her voice trembling. "Ash, we found you." "So you did," Ash replied. His voice was not the one she remembered. It was flat, devoid of warmth, a stranger's voice. It made her flinch. "We came to bring you home," Brock said, his tone that of a brother trying to reason with a runaway sibling. "This has gone on long enough. You're working with Lusamine, a known criminal. Cynthia abandoned her post. You're attacking League-sanctioned facilities. You have to stop this. People are afraid." "The people you should be afraid of are the ones who sent you here," Ash countered, his gaze unwavering. "The ones who fed you lies and convinced you to turn on your friend. Jaeger showed us the proof." Misty's voice was sharp, defensive. "He showed us the danger. Everything he warned us about is coming true. You're destabilizing the world." A humorless smile touched Ash's lips. "Is that what you call it? Or are you just repeating the lines he fed you? Did you ever stop to ask who Jaeger is? Who funds him? Who gave him the authority to declare me a global threat?" "He's trying to protect us," Serena cried, desperation cracking her voice. "From you, Ash, please, just listen. Come back with us. We can fix this. We can talk to the League, explain everything." "Explain what?" Ash interrupted, his voice finally taking on an edge of the cold fury that had been simmering beneath the surface. "Explain how you held me down while the world put a knife in my back. How you tried to steal my family from me. There's nothing to explain. You made your choice on that balcony." He saw the words hit them, saw the flicker of guilt and pain in their eyes. But they were too deep in their conviction, too desperate to believe they had done the right thing. "We did it to save you," Misty screamed, the words bursting out of her in a torrent of frustration. "We were trying to protect you from yourself." That was the line. The one he could not, would not, forgive. The quiet calm he had cultivated over the past months shattered, and the raw, unhealed wound of the betrayal was laid bare. "Save me?" he repeated, his voice dangerously low. He took a step forward. Latios and Latius mirrored his movement, their psychic pressure intensifying. "You weren't saving me. You were saving yourselves. You were saving yourselves from being afraid. You looked at my bond with my Pokémon, a bond we all used to admire, and you saw a monster. Jaeger gave your fear a name, and you clung to it like a prayer." He gestured to Latius. "Does she look like a monster to you? Aegis had her locked in a cage, draining her life force to power a weapon. We freed her. Is that destabilizing the world? Or is it protecting it from the very people you've allied yourselves with?" They had no answer. They could only fall back on their orders, on the mission they had been given. "We're not leaving without you, Ash," Brock said, his voice heavy with regret. His hand moved to his belt. "Don't make us do this." "You already did," Ash replied, his voice turning to ice. The battle began not with a shout, but with a shared, sorrowful understanding. "Steelix, use Iron Tail," Brock commanded. "Gyarados, Hydro Pump," Misty yelled. The two massive Pokémon launched their attacks. A shimmering steel tail the size of a bus swept toward Ash, while a high-pressure jet of water aimed to pin him down. Ash didn't move. He didn't have to. Latios shot forward, a blur of blue and white. He met the Iron Tail with a psychic barrier that shimmered and cracked, but held. Latios, though still recovering, unleashed a dragon pulse that collided with the Hydro Pump, erupting in a massive cloud of steam that momentarily obscured the battlefield. "Pikachu," Ash said, his voice a low command. "Let's end this." This wasn't a league battle. There were no rules, no turns. Pikachu's response was immediate. He didn't want to fight them. He remembered playing with Brock's Onix, splashing with Misty's Staryu. The thought was a sharp, painful pang. But Ash was his world. Ash's pain was his pain. He looked at Steelix, at Gyarados, and he saw not friends, but threats to his partner. But he couldn't do it. As Delphox launched a Mystic Fire, Greninja intercepted it with a Water Shuriken, the two attacks canceling each other out. Pikachu, poised to launch a Thunderbolt, saw Brock's face, etched with worry and determination. He hesitated. The torrent of electricity died in his cheeks. "Pika," he whimpered, looking at Ash, confused and torn. Ash felt his partner's conflict. He saw the hesitation. It was a painful reminder of the bonds they were being forced to sever. But hesitation was a luxury they couldn't afford. "It's okay, buddy," Ash said, his voice softening for just a moment. He reached up and stroked Pikachu's head. "I understand." He then looked at Greninja. A silent command passed between them. This battle would be his. "Greninja, double team." Then, Night Slash. In an instant, the clearing was filled with copies of the ninja Pokémon. Steelix, confused, roared and thrashed, trying to hit the illusory targets. Gyarados blasted water wildly, its attacks passing through the harmless mirages. Serena, her eyes filled with tears, pointed a trembling finger. "Delphox, burn them all." Fire blast. A massive, star-shaped inferno erupted from Delphox's wand, engulfing the area where the Greninja copies were. For a moment, the field was nothing but fire. "Did we get him?" Serena asked, her voice hopeful. The smoke cleared. The real Greninja stood untouched on a high branch of a pine tree, having used the chaos to reposition itself. And standing before it, shielding it from the residual heat with his own body, was Ash. His jacket was singed, but he was unharmed. "Is that all you have?" he asked, his voice echoing in the sudden silence. The three of them stared, shocked. He had put himself in the line of fire for his Pokémon. The old Ash would have done it out of reckless love. This Ash had done it with the cold calculation of a commander protecting his most valuable asset. The effect was infinitely more chilling. He wasn't playing their game. He was systematically dismantling it. He wasn't matching their power with his own. He was using their power against them, turning their brute force attacks into openings. "Brock," Ash said, his gaze locking onto his oldest friend. "You taught me about type matchups. You taught me strategy. Did you really think a frontal assault would work?" He made a subtle hand gesture. Greninja vanished from the branch. "Misty," he said, his voice turning to her. "You taught me that a water Pokémon's strength is its adaptability. That power isn't everything. Where is it?" Misty shouted, her Gyarados scanning the area frantically. "And Serena," he said, his voice softening almost imperceptibly, a flicker of the old Ash showing through. The pain was most acute when he looked at her. "You taught me to never give up until the very end." Greninja reappeared. It was behind them. It hadn't circled around. It had used the shadows of the trees, moving from one to the next with impossible speed. It now stood between them and the path back to the forest. Their escape was cut off. But some things, Ash finished, his voice hardening again, are already over. He didn't order a final attack. He didn't need to. The demonstration was complete. They were outmaneuvered, outthought, and comprehensively defeated. Their Pokemon were exhausted from hitting phantoms, while his were barely breathing hard. Steelix was tangled in its own desperate trenches. Gyarados was panting, its energy spent on wild attacks. Delphox's fire was sputtering. They had come here as an arm of the Pokemon League, as righteous crusaders. They were leaving as what they truly were, pawns. Go home, Ash said, his voice devoid of triumph, only a deep, profound weariness. Tell the League they failed. And tell them to stop sending my friends to do their dirty work. This fight is with Aegis. It's with Jaeger. You're just getting in the way. He turned his back on them, a gesture of finality more powerful than any attack. Find out who Jaeger really is, he said over his shoulder. Find out where his money comes from. Find out what happened at the New Island facility years ago, the one the League buried. If you ever truly were my friends, you'll look for the truth instead of blindly following orders. With that, he walked back toward the lake. Latios and Latias moved to flank him, their psychic presence a clear warning not to follow. Greninja melted back into the shadows. Only Pikachu remained, perched on Ash's shoulder, looking back at the three defeated trainers. There was no joy in his expression, only a shared, deep-seated sadness. Brock, Misty, and Serena stood in their defeat, the silence of the forest pressing in on them. Ash's words hung in the air, planting seeds of doubt in the barren ground of their conviction. New Island. The name meant nothing to them, but the way he'd said it, it was a clue. A loose thread. For the first time in months, they began to wonder if the monster they had been hunting was not Ash, but the man who had sent them. They recalled their weary Pokemon and turned to leave, not as victors, but as ghosts, haunted by the cold, unfamiliar eyes of the friend they had betrayed. The sun had set over Lake Verity, painting the sky in hues of deep purple and orange. The emotional storm of the afternoon had passed, leaving behind a heavy, somber quiet. Ash sat by the water's edge, skipping a stone across its glassy surface. One skip, 2, 3, then it sank into the depths. He wasn't angry anymore. The confrontation had lanced a wound, letting out the poison of his rage, but now all that was left was the ache. He had won, but it felt like a loss. He had proven his point, but he had severed a bond that had once been a cornerstone of his life. A light footstep approached from behind. He didn't need to turn. He smelled her perfume, a subtle, expensive scent of night-blooming jasmine and cold ambition. I saw the whole thing through Latias's eyes, Lusamine said, her voice a low murmur. She came to stand beside him, a dark, elegant silhouette against the fading light. You were magnificent, cold, decisive. You broke them. I didn't want to, Ash said, his voice quiet. He picked up another stone, feeling its smooth, cool weight in his palm. I know, she replied softly. And that is why you will win. Jaeger and your former friends are driven by fear. You are driven by a purpose that you have paid for with your own pain. There is no greater strength than that. She sat beside him on the cool grass, a move that surprised him with its casual intimacy. She was usually the commander, the strategist, the queen in her castle. Here, now, she was just a woman sitting by a lake. They remind you of what you lost, she stated, not as a question, but as a fact. Ash didn't answer. He just skipped the stone. 4 skips this time. I know something of loss, Lusamine said, her gaze distant, fixed on the far shore. I know what it is to be so consumed by an idea of perfection that you lose sight of the beauty that is right in front of you. My obsession with the ultra beasts, with beauty, it wasn't born of malice, Ash. It was born of love. A twisted, possessive love. He looked at her, truly looked at her. In the dim light, he could see the faint lines of past pain around her eyes, the ghost of the madness that had once consumed her. I wanted to protect my children, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Gladian and Lily. I wanted to create a perfect world for them, a paradise safe from all the ugliness of the outside world. But in my obsession to control that paradise, I became the monster they needed to be protected from. I drove them away. I lost them. In my quest for perfect, beautiful things, I broke the most beautiful things I ever had. She turned to him, her green eyes luminous in the twilight. When I saw you in Alola, fighting to save me from Nihilego, fighting to save my daughter, I saw what I had lost. A pure, untamed power that wasn't about control, but about connection. When I saw them betray you, I didn't just see an injustice. I saw a reflection of my own greatest failure. Her voice grew thick with an emotion he had never heard from her before, a raw, painful vulnerability. In you, Ash, I see a second chance. Not to control power, but to nurture it. To stand beside it, to help it grow, and to protect it from a world that will always try to chain what it cannot understand. Helping you is my atonement. The confession hung in the air between them, more intimate than any touch. She had stripped away the armor of the Ether President, of the leader of the Unbound, and showed him the broken woman beneath. She wasn't just his benefactor. She was his fellow exile. They were both broken, both remade by their pain. He didn't know what to say. The old Ash would have offered a clumsy but heartfelt platitude. The new Ash understood that some moments required no words. He simply reached out and took her hand. Her fingers were long and cool, and they intertwined with his, a perfect fit. They sat there in silence as the last light of day faded from the sky, their shared grip a silent pact. It was not a strategic alliance anymore. It was something deeper. A bond forged not in battle, but in the quiet understanding of two shattered souls finding a way to be whole again in each other's presence. Meanwhile, miles away, in a secure international police data center, Agent Annabelle frowned at her screen. She had been assigned to the Ketchum file, tasked with tracking the fugitive and his new, dangerous allies. But she was a good agent, and good agents followed the evidence, not the official story. The Aegis Gambit at Fortress Maelstrom had raised too many questions. The official report was that Ash's terrorist cell had attempted to overload the reactor, an act of wanton destruction that was only narrowly averted by Aegis's own failsafe systems. But the energy readings didn't match. Annabelle had seen reactor overloads before. They were chaotic, entropic. The energy signature from the fortress that night had been controlled. It looked less like an explosion being stopped and more like a wild Pokemon being tamed. On a hunch, she had pulled the sealed files on the Fortress Maelstrom's commander, Lieutenant Kessler. His psych profile showed a man with a dangerous superiority complex. Then, she pulled the funding records for the Aegis task force itself. It was a labyrinth of shell corporations and offshore accounts, but one name kept recurring in the source funding documents, heavily redacted but still traceable through old data ghosts. Ether Foundation. The old Ether Foundation. Lusamine's former empire. But the most disturbing find was when she cross-referenced the Aegis Task Force's charter with a deeply buried, classified incident report. An incident that had been scrubbed from almost every public and private record. Incident Report. 7B. Location. New Island Research Facility. Subject. Mewtwo. The report was heavily censored, but it detailed a catastrophic event involving a genetically engineered Pokemon of unimaginable psychic power. It spoke of a group of trainers, a storm, and a battle that nearly destroyed the island. And at the center of it, a single name that hadn't been redacted. A young, unknown trainer who had, according to the report, stood between two warring god-like Pokemon and quelled their rage, not with force, but with an act of selfless sacrifice. The trainer's name was Ash Ketchum. Annabelle leaned back in her chair, the pieces clicking into place with horrifying clarity. Ash wasn't a new threat. He was an old one the powers that be had been covering up for years. Jaeger hadn't discovered a dangerous anomaly. He had reactivated a dormant file. He was hunting Ash not because of what he might do, but because of what he had already done. Her orders were to hunt Ash Ketchum. But her instincts, the ones that had kept her alive through a dozen encounters with Ultra Beasts, were screaming at her that she was hunting the wrong man. Chapter 5. The World Will Listen. Premise. The Unbound decide to shift from a reactive to a proactive strategy. It's time to take control of the narrative. The broadcast. During the live finals of the Indigo League, the ultimate symbol of the Old Order, Lusamine's technical genius allows them to hijack every broadcast screen on the planet. Ash, flanked by Lusamine, a stoic Cynthia, and an ethereal Sabrina, addresses the world. He doesn't plead for innocence. He presents himself as a new power. He lays out irrefutable proof of Jaeger's conspiracy, the League's complicity, and the Aegis Task Force's goal of enslaving legendaries. He declares the Unbound's mission: to protect the balance the Leagues are too weak to maintain. He issues a challenge to the world: stand with the fearful Old Order, or stand with us. The siege and the defection. The broadcast sends the world into chaos. Jaeger, enraged, immediately triangulates their position and launches a massive assault on their hidden base. A huge battle ensues, showcasing the full power of the Unbound. Just as the tide seems to turn against them, a ship bearing the international police insignia arrives. Annabelle, having made her choice, publicly defects, using her knowledge of Aegis tactics to help the Unbound counterattack and secure a decisive victory. The Devil's Bargain. Humiliated on a global stage and driven to the edge, Jaeger retreats to his sanctum. He fully gives himself over to the Null. In a terrifying scene, black, viscous energy pours into him, reshaping him. His eyes glow with a void-like darkness. He is no longer just a man. He is the avatar of entropy, his goal shifted from control to utter annihilation. Chapter 6. The War at the Beginning. Premise. The stakes escalate from worldly to cosmic. Empowered by the Null, Jaeger's objective is no longer to capture legendaries but to erase them from existence by destroying their source, the Hall of Origin. The Unholy Alliance. Dialga and Palkia appear before Ashe, not to fight him, but to plead for his help. They sense the threat to their creator, Arceus. The Unbound, realizing this is an extinction-level event, agree to help. They travel to the dimension of the Hall of Origin to find Jaeger and his null-corrupted Aegis forces already laying siege to it. The Grand Battle. An epic battle unfolds. The Unbound fight alongside legendary Pokémon. Cynthia's Garchomp clashes with null-twisted machines. Sabrina's psychic power shields them from mental assaults. Lusamine's strange and powerful Pokémon exploit tactical weaknesses. At the center of it all is Ashe, his aura of creation flaring, a golden light against the encroaching darkness of the Null. He is the only one who can truly harm Jaeger. Atonement on the battlefield. As the battle rages, Ashe's former friends arrive. Led by a grim-faced Gary, who now understands the magnitude of his mistake, they have come to help. There are no grand apologies, only action. Brock's Pokémon provides battlefield triage, Misty's water Pokémon create defensive barriers, and Gary uses his research to find a flaw in the null energy that powers Jaeger's forces. They fight to atone. Creation versus Unmaking. The climax is a one-on-one duel between Ashe and the null-empowered Jaeger at the threshold of Arceus's chamber. It's a battle of pure concepts. Ashe, using his bonds, his ingenuity, and the full, untamed force of his aura, doesn't kill Jaeger. He performs a spiritual surgery, violently severing Jaeger's connection to the Null, leaving the man broken and mortal once more as the dark energy dissipates. The Null itself, its vessel lost, howls in frustration and recedes into a shimmering rift in space-time, a scar left on reality. Chapter 7. Inheritors of the Dawn. Premise. The aftermath of the battle and the establishment of a new world order. This chapter focuses on resolution, romance, and setting the stage for the true war to come. A world remade. The Aegis task force is dismantled, its crimes exposed. The Pokémon League system is in shambles, and world leaders are forced to negotiate with the Unbound as an official entity. Cynthia is offered a leadership role in a new, reformed global league, which she considers on the condition that the Unbound remain an independent peacekeeping force. Closing old wounds. Ashe has a quiet, final meeting with Brock, Misty, and Serena. Apologies are made and accepted, but the old dynamic is gone forever. There is a mutual respect, but they are on different paths now. Ashe has his new family. He wishes them well, and they part ways as allies, but no longer as the family they once were. The Unbound family. The core group, Ashe, Lusamine, Cynthia, Sabrina, and Annabelle, are together at the Ether Paradise, now a known and respected global headquarters. The romantic arc culminates here, with Ashe and Lusamine acknowledging their deep connection. They are partners in every sense of the word, their ambitions and powers perfectly complementing each other. The other women have also found their place in this new family, bound by loyalty and shared purpose. The true war. Arceus communicates with Ashe directly, confirming that his power is the aura of creation, a fundamental force meant to protect existence. It warns him that the Null was not defeated, merely repelled. The rift in space-time is a permanent scar, and the Null will gather its strength to try again. The Unbound's fight was not the end, it was merely the first battle in a cosmic war. Final scene. Ashe stands on a balcony overlooking his new home, Pikachu on his shoulder, watching the sunset. He is no longer the boy who left Pallet Town. He is a leader, a warrior, and a protector. Lusamine joins him, her hand confidently taking his. They don't look back at the past. They look forward, towards the cosmic rift shimmering faintly in the twilight sky. They are the unbound. And they are ready. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.